Welcome to my channel. Please subscribe for more hidden history. Let's start.
What if I told you that the biggest threat to American power wasn't a war, but a factory? Not missiles, not tanks, not even nuclear weapons, but cargo ships, microchips, and billion-dollar trade deals. For nearly 100 years, the United States stood at the top of the world. America controlled the global economy, the strongest military, the internet, Hollywood, Wall Street, and the future itself. Then something changed. A country that was once poor, divided, and humiliated by foreign powers quietly transformed into the world's second-largest economy. Today, China builds more ships than America. It manufactures most of the world's electronics. It challenges the U.S. in artificial intelligence, space technology, electric vehicles, and military power. And for the first time since the Cold War, Washington believes another superpower could actually replace it. But how did this happen? How did China go from bicycles and rice farms to becoming America's greatest rival? And more importantly, is this the beginning of a new Cold War, or the start of something even bigger? Because the battle between America and China is no longer just about politics. It's about who controls the future of the world. This is the story of how China became America's biggest rival. To understand modern China, we have to go back nearly 200 years. Today, China looks powerful, but in the 1800s, China was weak, very weak. At the time, the Qing dynasty ruled over one of the largest populations on Earth. China believed it was the Middle Kingdom, the center of civilization. But while China remained isolated, the West industrialized. Britain developed factories, steam engines, modern weapons, and global trade routes. China did not. Then came the Opium Wars. In the 1800s, Britain was illegally selling opium into China. Millions became addicted. When Chinese officials tried to stop the trade, Britain responded with military force. The result? China lost badly. Western powers forced China into humiliating circumstances. Treaties. Ports were taken. Hong Kong was handed to Britain. Foreign powers gained enormous influence inside Chinese territory. For China, this period became known as the Century of Humiliation. And that memory still shapes Chinese politics today. Because modern China is obsessed with one thing: never being weak again. Over the next decades, China collapsed into chaos, civil wars, foreign invasions, famine, and corruption. Then, Japan invaded China during World War II. Millions died. Entire cities were destroyed. After the war, China entered another civil war between two sides: the nationalists, led by Chiang Kai-shek, and the communists, led by Mao Zedong. In 1949, Mao won, and everything changed. When Mao Zedong founded the People's Republic of China in 1949, the country was devastated. China was poor, mostly rural, and economically broken. But Mao promised something revolutionary. He promised unity, strength, and independence from foreign domination. For many Chinese people, Mao was not just a political leader. He was seen almost like a savior. At first, the Communist Party focused on rebuilding China. Land reforms redistributed property, the government expanded education, and industries were nationalized. But Mao wanted more. He didn't just want China to recover. He wanted China to become the most powerful communist nation on Earth. So, in 1958, he launched the Great Leap Forward. The idea sounded ambitious. China would rapidly industrialize and surpass Western economies. Farmers were forced into giant communes. People were told to melt metal in backyard furnaces. Local officials lied about production numbers, and the entire system collapsed. One of the worst famines in human history followed. Historians estimate that tens of millions died. But Mao wasn't finished. In 1966, he launched another massive campaign called the Cultural Revolution. Its goal was to eliminate old ideas and protect communist ideology. Schools shut down. Professors were humiliated. Historical sites were destroyed. Millions were persecuted. China entered years of political chaos. To the outside world, China looked unstable and isolated. Meanwhile, America became the dominant superpower after World War II. The U.S. economy exploded. American technology dominated the world. Hollywood spread American culture everywhere. At that time, few people imagined China could ever compete with the United States. But then something unexpected happened. America itself helped open the door. In the 1970s, the United States faced a major geopolitical problem, the Soviet Union. The Cold War between America and the USSR was at its peak. Both countries had nuclear weapons. Both competed for global influence. But there was one opportunity. China and the Soviet Union had become enemies. American leaders realized something strategic. If the US could improve relations with China, it could weaken the Soviet Union. So, in 1972, President Richard Nixon visited China. The images shocked the world, an American president meeting communist China. For decades, the two countries had barely spoken. Now they were opening diplomatic relations. This was one of the most important geopolitical moves of the 20th century. But the biggest transformation happened after Mao died in 1976. Because a new leader emerged, Deng Xiaoping. And, unlike Mao, Deng cared less about ideology and more about results. Deng looked at China and realized something simple. Communism alone would not make China rich. So he made a historic decision. China would open its economy, not fully capitalist, not fully communist, but something new. Factories opened. Foreign businesses were invited in. Special economic zones were created. Private entrepreneurship slowly returned. And Western companies saw an opportunity. China had a massive population, cheap labor, and a government determined to industrialize. American corporations rushed in, Nike, Apple, and General Motors. Manufacturing began moving to China. At first, this seemed like a perfect deal. American companies made huge profits, and consumers got cheaper products. And China gained jobs, technology, and investment. But few people realized what was really happening. China wasn't just becoming the world's factory, it was learning how global trade works, learning advanced manufacturing, learning technology, learning supply chains. And step by step, China started climbing. The 1980s and 1990s transformed China faster than almost any country in human history. Entire cities appeared almost overnight. Skyscrapers replaced farmland, and highways expanded across the country. Millions left villages to work in factories. China became an economic machine. And one moment changed everything. In 2001, China joined the World Trade Organization. This allowed China deeper access to global markets. Exports exploded, factories multiplied, and foreign investment flooded into the country. The phrase, "Made in China," suddenly appeared everywhere. On phones, shoes, toys, furniture, and electronics. China became the manufacturing center of the world. Meanwhile, America experienced something very different. Many U.S. factories closed, and manufacturing jobs disappeared. Entire industrial towns declined. For American consumers, cheap Chinese goods were convenient. However, for many workers, globalization felt devastating. And while Americans debated trade policies, China kept growing. The numbers were shocking. Hundreds of millions escaped poverty. China built massive infrastructure projects, including ports, railways, airports, and megacities. No country had ever industrialized at this scale so quickly. Then, China began investing heavily in education and technology. Universities expanded, engineering programs exploded, and research funding increased. China was no longer satisfied with producing cheap products. It wanted innovation. And this is where America started becoming nervous, because China wasn't just competing in low-cost manufacturing anymore. It was entering industries the US once dominated, such as artificial intelligence, telecommunications, electric vehicles, space exploration, and semiconductors. The student was becoming a competitor and eventually a rival. In the 21st century, power is no longer measured only by armies. Technology became the new battlefield, and China moved aggressively. Companies like Huawei, Tencent, Alibaba, and BYD grew into global giants. China became a leader in 5G technology, battery production, solar panels, electric vehicles, and digital payments. In some industries, China moved faster than the West. Meanwhile, the Chinese government launched enormous national strategies. One of the most controversial was Made in China 2025. The goal was to dominate advanced industries. The Chinese government wanted to reduce dependence on foreign technology and become a global leader in innovation. Washington saw this as a direct challenge. American officials began accusing China of unfair trade practices, including intellectual property theft and forced technology transfers. Cyber espionage. Tensions escalated rapidly. Then came Donald Trump. The Trump administration fundamentally changed America's approach toward China. For decades, many U.S. leaders believed economic cooperation would eventually make China more politically open. That didn't happen. Instead, China became richer, stronger, and more confident. So, Trump launched a trade war. Tariffs were imposed on Chinese goods. China retaliated. Billions of dollars in trade became affected. But the real battle was technology. America targeted Huawei. Restrictions were placed on semiconductor exports. The U.S. pressured allies to reduce dependence on Chinese tech. This was bigger than economics. It was about who would control the future. Because whoever dominates artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and advanced computing could dominate the 21st century. And both countries know it. Economic competition alone would already make this rivalry historic. But there's another layer: military power. For decades after the Cold War, America's military superiority was unquestioned. The U.S. Navy controlled global oceans. American aircraft carriers projected power worldwide. The Pentagon spent more than the next several countries combined. China could not compete, at least not at first. But China studied America carefully, especially after events like the Gulf War. Chinese military strategists watched how advanced U.S. technology destroyed opponents with incredible speed. And they realized something dangerous. If China ever wanted to protect its growing power, it needed a modern military. So, Beijing invested massively. The People's Liberation Army transformed. China built advanced missiles, cyber warfare units, stealth aircraft, naval fleets, aircraft carriers, and space capabilities. Today, China has the world's largest navy by number of ships. And nowhere is this competition more dangerous than the South China Sea. This region is critical for global trade. Trillions of dollars in shipping pass through it. China claims large parts of the sea. Other Asian countries dispute those claims. Meanwhile, the United States conducts military operations there to challenge Chinese territorial expansion. The tension is constant. Then, there's Taiwan. And this may be the most dangerous issue of all. China considers Taiwan part of its territory. Taiwan sees itself as self-governing. The United States supports Taiwan militarily and politically. If a conflict ever erupts over Taiwan, it could pull the world's two biggest powers into direct confrontation. Something unimaginable just decades ago. The rivalry between America and China isn't only about military or technology. It's about influence. Who shapes the global system? For decades, the United States dominated international institutions. The dollar became the world's reserve currency. American banks influenced global finance. American media shaped global culture. But China began building its own influence. One major example is the Belt and Road Initiative. This massive global infrastructure project aims to connect Asia, Africa, Europe, and beyond through roads, railways, ports, and investment. China has invested billions of dollars into developing countries. Supporters say China is helping build critical infrastructure. Critics argue China is expanding political influence and creating debt dependence. Either way, China's global reach expanded dramatically. Chinese companies now operate worldwide. Chinese investments influence governments. China became Africa's largest trading partner. At the same time, China increased its diplomatic presence. Meanwhile, America started becoming more internally divided. Political polarization intensified. Economic inequality grew. Wars in the Middle East damaged America's global image. And some countries began asking a major question. Will the future belong to America or China? At its core, this rivalry is also ideological. The United States promotes liberal democracy, free speech, open elections, and individual freedoms. China, on the other hand, promotes a very different model, a powerful, centralized state, with economic growth under authoritarian political control and long-term strategic planning. Chinese leaders argue that their system delivers stability and rapid development. American leaders, however, argue that China's system threatens democratic values. This ideological divide shapes global politics. Developing nations now see two competing models of power, the American model and the Chinese model. Social media, surveillance technology, censorship, cybersecurity, and information control have all become part of this broader competition. And artificial intelligence may intensify it even further, Because the country that dominates AI could reshape economies, militaries, labor markets, and even public opinion. This is why the rivalry feels so intense. Both countries believe the stakes are enormous, not just for themselves, but for the future global order. Today, many people ask one question: can America stop China's rise? The answer is complicated because despite its incredible growth, China faces major problems. Its population is aging, birth rates are falling, youth unemployment has become a concern, debt levels are rising, and the real estate sector faces instability. China also depends heavily on global trade, and advanced semiconductors remain a major vulnerability. Meanwhile, the United States still has enormous advantages. The dollar remains dominant. America leads in many advanced technologies. Its universities attract global talent. The U.S. military remains extraordinarily powerful. And perhaps most importantly, America still has strong alliances: Japan, South Korea, NATO countries, Australia, and India, which is increasingly moving closer strategically. China, despite its power, has fewer trusted allies. But America also faces serious challenges: political division, massive national debt, internal social tensions, questions about long-term leadership. This rivalry is far from decided. And, unlike the Cold War with the Soviet Union, China is deeply connected to the global economy. America and China trade with each other constantly. Their economies are intertwined, which makes the rivalry incredibly dangerous and incredibly complicated, because neither side can easily walk away. The relationship between America and China may define the 21st century. Every major issue connects to it: technology, trade, climate change, military power, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, space exploration, and global finance. The decisions made in Washington and Beijing could affect billions of people. And history shows that when rising powers challenge dominant powers, conflict often follows. Some experts call this the Thucydides trap, a dangerous pattern where fear between major powers leads to war. But others believe something different: that economic interdependence makes large-scale conflict unlikely, that both countries need stability, and that competition does not have to end in catastrophe. Still, tensions continue growing. The world is already splitting in subtle ways. Supply chains are shifting, countries are choosing sides, technology systems are separating, and military alliances are strengthening. The era of uncontested American dominance may be ending. But whether China truly replaces the United States remains uncertain, because power is not only about money or military strength. It's also about trust, innovation, culture, alliances, and the ability to inspire the world. The real question may not be whether China becomes number one, but whether the world is entering an age where two superpowers must somehow coexist. And if they fail, the consequences could reshape humanity itself. For most of modern history, the world revolved around one dominant superpower. Now, for the first time in generations, that dominance is being challenged. China's rise is not just an economic story. It's a story about ambition, humiliation, power, technology, and the future of civilization. The battle between America and China is already changing the world around you. The phone in your hand, the apps you use, the products you buy, the news you see, and even the future jobs that will exist. This rivalry is no longer happening in the background. It's shaping the future in real time. But what do you think? Will China eventually surpass the United States, or will America remain the world's leading superpower? Comment your opinion below. And if you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more deep geopolitical stories, global power struggles, and the hidden forces shaping our future. Because the next chapter of history is already being written.